the changes that the moon goes through, in a month period, right? You see all the different sides and faces and phases, and going through motherhood, that's, a common theme, right? There's a phase through everything. This phase too shall pass. So yeah, I think it's a good example.
Hey everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Entering Motherhood, a podcast dedicated specifically to new moms going through this amazing journey in life. I'm your host, Sarah Bilger, a postpartum nutritional coach / mechanical engineer. And as always, I'm so excited to be here with you and share all of the information I've been lucky enough to obtain since becoming a mom.
In this episode, we talk with Molly Alesch about her connection with the moon as she entered motherhood and the journey that led her to write a children's book called Moon Juice.
Hello and welcome to Entering Motherhood. I'm super excited to have you here today and get going with this conversation about everything that's going on in motherhood and with Moon Juice. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, go ahead.
Hi, Sarah. I am so excited to be here as well. My name is Molly Alesch, and I am the author of the new children's book, Moon Juice. And I live just south of Boston in Massachusetts. I have two children. One is 5 and one is 3. And I know your podcast is all about entering motherhood. So just a little bit about my entrance into motherhood. I'm one of 5. My mother's made it look really easy. Managing and mothering 5 daughters. And so I kind of assumed that's how it was going to be, is that my entrance into motherhood would be fairly easy. And that definitely was not the case. My son had reflux issues, and I just remember a lot of late nights. I foolishly thought we would come home from the hospital and he would sleep through the night. And that was, as you know, definitely not the case. And so that was a wake up call there. And I had many, many late nights with him, like I said, due to the reflux. And that's how I actually first became fascinated with the moon, is because so many nights I felt like it was just me, him, and the moon awake, peering through a window, and like that nobody else in the universe was awake. With my daughter, the late nights became fewer. As you know, you learn, and you learn from the first, and you go on and take things a little bit easier, and give yourself a little more grace as well with the second. And she didn't have reflux either. And but with her, I actually became more fascinated with the moon because I now had 2, and I was working full time and had to figure out a way to get it all done. And I became more fascinated with the moon because the moon goes through cycles. And I think as a woman, especially, we go through cycles as well. And so there's periods of the month where we can be more productive and less productive. And I really utilize that to, just make things more efficient with my second and to try to get everything done.
That's amazing. So, like you were saying, in your childhood, like it looked easy. And so like you thought entering motherhood, it was going to be this easy progression and everything was going to go. And then that was not the case. And I think, we only have memories up until a certain point. And maybe if we had siblings that have a larger age gap or something like that, like we might see what our parents are like in that initial postpartum period or those early moments, early days. But usually, like, we're so unaware of what they had to go through. And sometimes they don't even remember exactly what it was like in that initial period. Like, they, have grown and become such a different person that it's hard to really go back to remembering what it was like then. So, like, yeah, like it looked easy, like when you were older and things like that. But, I'm sure they had their own, like, time navigating and whatnot. But, I love that you were able to find that connection to the moon in that early postpartum period, because I think we do sometimes feel like we're alone and the only ones up in the middle of the night, and, nobody else is awake. And so being able to look out your window or go outside and see something as consistent as the moon always being there, I think that's just so fascinating that, it's something that is probably overlooked to a lot of moms.
Exactly. And looking out your window and, as you said, having it be a consistent thing, and also seeing, the changes that the moon goes through, in a month period, right? You see all the different sides and faces and phases, and going through motherhood, that's, a common theme, right? There's a phase through everything. This phase too shall pass. So yeah, I think it's a good example.
That's awesome. So, what else can you tell us? What did you start digging into? What fascinated you the most about the moon? And what have you learned since then?
What fascinated me most about the moon is that it has actually been used for many years in many cultures, by different groups of people for, what I call the magical wonders. And so I became fascinated when it was full and started getting into manifesting and setting intentions. And that's what my children's book is about. So that really fascinated me, is how we can connect to the moon. And like I said, in 2019, when my children were very young, I started incorporating them in my ritual with the full moon, and that is setting out waters and setting intention, charging water under the moon and setting intentions. And I guess that was another thing I learned through motherhood and through this ritual and my connection to the moon, is that you can incorporate children in stuff that you want to do at a very young age. So often we think there has to be like a time set aside for moms to do this, the stuff that we want to do, and you really can incorporate children in everything.
So, what does your ritual look like, and how have your kids been able to enjoy that with you as well?
So there's actually a period of usually 2 or 3 days every month when the moon is technically considered full, and we take advantage of all of those days, even though it's 100% full, at a given only one given time. But we do it for 2 or 3 nights, and we started with we just found old mason jars, and I had my children decorate them with things that they wanted to become. So my son, really wants to have superpowers and be a superhero. So he, drew, Spider-Man and Superman and stuff like that. And my daughter's younger, so she just did general drawings. But so the idea is to draw stuff of that they wanted to become. For adults, it would be known as, setting an intention. And it's a little bit difficult for them to understand now, right? But they get the idea of the pictures, whereas adults would do more of words. So we decorate the jars, and then we fill them with the water on the nights that the moon is considered full, and then we set them out before we go to bed. So then in the morning they're excited to get up and get them, and they instead of calling them moon water, they call them moon juice, right? And they drink it for breakfast, and right after they drink it, they literally think they can, they're so much faster and they can jump high and they can blast off to the moon. So it's a neat thing to see them believe in superpowers, believe in magic, connect to nature. And also it's a ritual that connects us, right? They look forward to it each month. No matter how busy we are, we make sure we do it.
So you were saying something along the line, you called them magical wonders. What are they, and what other cultures have really kind of created rituals around the moon? And what have you kind of like incorporated into all of that?
Well, I guess first and foremost, it was recently Indigenous Peoples Day. And so the Native American cultures are a huge example of incorporating the moon. My sister actually did a project for me looking, because as we know, there's different names for the moon each month. The hunter's moon, the pink moon, the worm moon, etc. But the Native American cultures actually have their own names. My sister did a project where she met with one of the local tribes here and went through all of their moons. And there's actually 13 moons in Native American culture, just with the way the days fall in a year. In a certain year, there's usually 13 moons. So that's the first place that we look, as the Native American culture and the indigenous people, because obviously they were here before us. and all around the world. That's something I want to get into, is really exploring those other cultures. And on my social media accounts and stuff, I plan to have those different practices and the different words that they use for the moon.
That's awesome. So where can we find, all the different types of moons, or, depending on what month it is and they're changing, where are some good resources to really tap into the specific moon that we're experiencing that month?
So the Farmer's Almanac is one place, and then of course on my social media accounts, I always name the moons, and then on my website there will be a downloadable PDF with that with the Native American names of the moon. So if anybody's looking to track them that way, that's where it will be available.
Awesome. So what have you enjoyed the most in, creating these rituals and really connecting with the moon?
I have enjoyed the most is connecting not only with my children, but with other adults. Just in this project alone, I have people sending me pictures of the moon, and it's really neat to see my children 5 and 3 getting excited about a full moon. But then, my mom sending me a picture of full moon, and I talked with you earlier about becoming fascinated with the moon when I entered motherhood, but it actually started earlier than that. When I was deployed overseas, I would look up at the moon and tell my family members, "Hey, you're looking at the same moon as me. No matter how we're separated by continents, but we still see the same thing." So it's just I actually call it love notes. It's sending each other, sending my family members, sending friends pictures of the moon, knowing that we're looking up at the same thing. It's like a love note.
I think that's so amazing. And I think, in those like early months and everything, like when we do feel so disconnected, it's nice to know that there is something along those lines that, maybe friends and family are far away, like maybe we moved, or there's situations that we can't be with them, but being able to stay connected by something that, like you said, no matter where you are, we're all looking up at the same sky, the same moon. And I think that's a really good connection to make. And something that's just so, like I was saying before, like consistent and like reassuring.
Definitely. And, entering motherhood, that was the other thing is that, uh, you know, you as a mother, you depend on your own mother, right? To teach you, how to take care of this baby. And my mother lives, a couple states away. So she wasn't able to be here to help me with everything. But that's another way we were connected, right? And she has that connection with her grandkids as well. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
That is awesome. So what else, like beside the moon, like did you kind of like experience in early postpartum? You said like your son had reflux and things like that. Like what else was going on that you necessarily didn't think was something that was going to occur, and now here you are with a new baby, and all these things are happening?
Well, breastfeeding, is a big one, right? Everybody says it's the most natural thing, and it's really not. So that was a challenge. I had no idea how often that the babies would be at your breast, and how much they would. And neither one of mine took a pacifier, so how much they would need it for comfort. Being at a mother's breast is, whether you're breastfeeding or not, being at a mother's, bosom is the safest place a baby feels. And I think that's, beautiful. But when you're in the moment, it it can certainly be annoying, right? To have somebody on you all the time when you're not used to that. So that was a big one, is just, breastfeeding and then realizing how touched you were going to be, right? We talk about being overtouched, and that was certainly something that I had to adjust to.
What really led you to write the book? Like, at what point did you feel like this was something that needed to be done and worked on? And what really helped push you to come to write it?
It kind of happened organically, and naturally. And I just in sharing the ritual with my immediate family and friends, people started doing it. They started putting their own moon juice, right? My parents, my in-laws, and they started sending me pictures. I'm like, people like this. And then my niece and nephew visited over the holidays, over Christmas, and they were really intrigued by it. So other kids were intrigued by it, and I was like, I really need to share this with the world. Yeah, so that kind of happened organically, but then I'm also doing it for my kids. It's possible that maybe, 5 people buy my book, and that's fine. I'm not in it for that. But it was a fun process, but it wasn't without its challenges. And I want to show children that, we can, as Glennon Doyle says, we can do hard things, right? And we can do things that are uncomfortable. And if I can leave that legacy for them, that's pretty neat. And then also as a mother, entering motherhood, sometimes we feel like we lose part of ourselves. And this was one thing that was my thing. It was my own project. It was something besides being a mother. And that's the other thing I want to demonstrate to my children is that I am a mother. I love being a mother. That's the best job in the world. But I also have my own things and I can also do other things.
That's amazing. That's what, yeah, I think, I've kind of come to that feeling as well. And I think, that's what really kind of like propelled this podcast and like getting out there and talking to more people. And I think when we're able to give ourselves that permission of we're allowed to be a mom and something else, or we're allowed to be our own person, but still be there for our kids. And so like I'd love if you kind of like dug into that process a little bit more and what like your feelings were, and were there any like guilt feelings like when you were working on the book or collaborating and everything? Like did you feel like you were, taking time away from your kids, or what was that like internally?
Absolutely. So I had no idea how to write a children's book. That's not my first occupation. I would love to make it my first occupation. But I had no idea how to do it. And so as a woman, I think we are getting better and we're naturally inclined to ask for support. So that's the first thing I did. I asked for support. I reached out. I would let everybody know I wanted to do this. And then people started recommending, people to help with it. But to get that help, it required an investment. Not as significant, but of course I was going to have to pay for some of that support. And you talked about guilt, and I had that guilt. What am I doing? This money is something I want to do. And with the assistance of my coach, she kind of helped me work through that. And, I've really learned that me having my own thing and being happy has made me, a better mother. And so investing in myself, investing in my passion, investing in what I wanted to do actually made me a better mother and, better to connect with my kids. It has certainly been busy. I do a lot of the work while they're, when they go to bed early and stuff. But it's also been neat to share it with them. So not only am I feel like a better mother, I feel more connected to them.
What would you say to a mom that maybe feels like she wants to find something for herself or have, a way to not feel like all she's doing is being a mom? And like what would you say to kind of encourage them to follow a passion or find a hobby of sorts that is going to be uniquely for them and something that they can kind of like disconnect from just being a mom, and like why you feel like it was so beneficial, and like you said, like you were able to connect more with your kids because of this.
Yeah, I mean a lot of the work, and I have to give credit to my coach Emily Karen. She, has helped me work through a lot of this. So I don't certainly don't want to sound like I came to all this myself. But as far as for a mom, who's considering maybe pursuing a passion or investing in herself, I think the big thing is, that we always talk about filling your own cup first, and a rising tide helps all boats rise, and you know I think that's easy to understand at the conceptual level and a little bit harder to put into practice. So it does take practice, give yourself grace. But for me, I remember making a list of, if I do this, if I explore this passion, how will this make me a better mom, and how will other people benefit from that? So if there's any mothers out there that really can see from a list perspective or writing it down, just helping to write it out and say, what will this do for me and what will it do for others, is really helpful. As far as, finding a hobby or finding a passion, I kind of think you don't really need to search too far. I think if you, and again, as my coach tell me, do what feels good. She says, feeling good is the work. And so I don't think you have to look too hard for a hobby. What feels good to you? What do you want to do? As women, we've been taught to not really explore our feelings or do what we want to do. We take care of everybody first, so that might take some internal work, but it's right there. And the other thing that she says is follow the breadcrumbs. So what feels good? What's the next thing that feels good? It might not ultimately be what you want to do, but it will lead you to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. You just have to keep doing what feels good to you.
That's awesome advice. What else would you kind of say, like looking back from where you're at now and how much you've grown and progressed in motherhood? What would you say to, your past self in those like initial first few months, days, even that you wish you would have known or been able to see another side of?
I think I would have, changed my expectations, and just known that, everything goes in phases and everything is a season. And so I probably would have told myself, this is going to be a season and it's probably going to be a slow season. It's probably going to be like winter where you're inside more and you're going, internal a little bit more. And then just knowing that, all phases pass. I mean, people say it now, but once you experience it, you truly know that everything goes in phases. The baby will be sleeping fabulously for 2 months, and then 3 months they won't be, and then, it will cycle back through. So I think that would be the biggest thing is I think we set these false expectations for mothers that, we post pictures on Instagram of when everybody has matching outfits and everybody looks good, and we probably need to post more pictures of, breasts hanging out and milk all over the place, and yeah, just to set expectations.
Can you give us a little insight or like a sneak peek of a page from the book or what your favorite part writing it was?
Yes. So I guess the climax of the book is that the moon juice jars break. And this actually happened to us in real life. In January, we put the moon juice out, and we live in the Northeast, so it was too cold, and the glass jars broke, and spilled all over the place, so that we couldn't drink it the next day. And my son was like, "Oh no, now we're not going to have magical powers." So that's kind of climax of the book. What happens when these moon juice jars break and you don't have your magical powers. And then my favorite part is, and I won't give too much of the book away, but the sister and the brother are connected, and she kind of reminds him that the power is inside of us all along. And that's the message from the mama from the beginning, is that whatever you want to become is already inside of you. And so the little boy, is reminded by the little girl that whatever he wants to become is already inside of him. So, and I think that's another big message throughout the book, is that, I believe children are born with innate gifts and superpowers. We don't need anything to make us superheroes. But it's our job as parents and grown-ups and mothers to remind children of that and to help them to not stop believing in magic.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Do you have any other, fun facts that you've learned along the way about the moon, or how you were saying, like we have cycles as women and the moon has their cycles, and, if there's any correlation of that you found that you wanted to share?
Yeah, one exciting thing is, well, my son is really into the moon, of course, because I am. So we read all these kind of books. So the children's facts are pretty fascinating. One that we find fascinating is that the moon is actually moving away from us, very slowly moving away from Earth. The other thing I find fascinating is just the connection between the moon and the waves and the tides. I mean, that's a whole separate area that is absolutely fascinating. I find it fascinating because we live in the Northeast on the coast, near the ocean. So that is fascinating. And then, as well as, I really feel it now because I pay attention, but just, during the new moon is kind of where you're a little bit more internal, going inside yourself, maybe doing more quieter activities. And then as the moon gets fuller, you tend to be more willing to be seen. So if you're in business, that's a good time to be seen. The moon is full, so it's illuminating everything, and that includes you. So, and then after that, is a good time to kind of complete projects as we get closer to the new moon again. To give credit to, I during those long days with my second, I read Kate Northrup's book, which is Due Less, and she talks a lot about not only the moon cycle, but the how a woman's menstrual cycle can kind of match up with the moon cycle. And if you're able to kind of manage both of those and do your work around both of those cycles, you can be really, really powerful.
I think I'm just like super fascinated about learning about all of this and, like creating my own moon juice. And, for somebody like listening to this and wanting to start and do it, what would you kind of like suggest? Do we just get a jar, write out our intentions, fill it up with water? Like what should we do to get started?
You just do whatever is fun to you and what makes sense to you. So the general idea is you need water, you need a container, and if you want to set an intention, if you want to draw a picture, if that's easier, but just make it fun for you and make it fun for the whole family. But yeah, just any type of a container, and then you can decorate it. You can put rocks in there. You can put gems and stones in there, crystals and stuff if you're into that. Fill it with water, put it out on a full moon, and set an intention, and then drink it the next day. And of course, as you'll learn from the book, it's not magical. It is magical, but not completely magical. You still have to put in the work when you set in the intention, and the children in the book learn that they still have to put in some work. But so that would be the next step, is after you do that, having a plan for doing that work toward that intention.
So do you have any other like final things that you'd like to add to either talk about the moon specifically or just motherhood in general that you'd want to share?
No, I mean, I think, the just appreciating all phases. So, as I said, learning as a new mother that everything goes in phases, but that we can find beauty in every phase. So it's just not when things are going well, but there's certainly beauty in the other phases as well. The moon isn't just beautiful when it's full. The moon is also beautiful when it's a tiny, tiny sliver, as a waxing, recently new and then waxing to a full moon. So just being able to appreciate the beauty in all phases of motherhood, I think that's a big one.
Awesome. So, where can we find you? Where are you at on social media? What's your website? Where can we get the book? Everything like that. Give us the details.
So I'm on all social. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. It's Moon Juice Mama. You can find me there. And then I have a website. It's moonjuicemama.com. And you can buy the book off of my website at moonjuicemama.com, or it is available on Amazon.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming and, sharing your personal story and really just like enlightening us about moon juice and what all goes into that. And, like a big congratulations to your book and everything that's going along with that.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure.
Well, this wraps up yet another episode of Entering Motherhood. I hope that you have found this episode helpful, and if you liked it, please share it with others who might also benefit from this information. If there's anything that you'd like to know more about, or maybe you know someone who'd like to be on the show, please visit my website, enteringmotherhood.com.
I'm so thrilled to be going on this journey with you and getting the amazing opportunity to help moms during this postpartum experience. You can also now find us on Instagram and Facebook at Entering Motherhood.